Today's case brings us to Dublin in Ireland, and to the town Rathfarnham, a quiet middle-class area in the heart of Dublin. It's an area from which it's easy to escape to the mountains, while also being close enough to Dublin's city centre. The town is only a short walk to Bushy Park. This has a playground and an extensive wooded area to walk around. Rathfarnham is home to a castle that was built in 1583, and it is one of Ireland's oldest castles. A disappearance is very rare in Ireland, never mind the town Rathfarnham, and when there was a report that a child had gone missing, it shook the town of Rathfarnham and the whole of Ireland. On Thursday the 23rd of October 1986, 13-year-old Philip Cairns made his way home from his secondary school, Colaiste Eanna. He went home for his lunch. He started first year there only a month before, and he had settled into a routine nicely, though he preferred to spend his lunch hour at home, and he made a 15-minute walk to and from the local boys' school, through his neighbourhood. Philip was the second youngest of 6, with 4 older sisters and 1 younger brother. He was described as quiet, a bit shy, and very well behaved. Philip's mother was also home on the 23rd, as Philip's sister was at home with a toothache. She prepared a sandwich when Philip came in for his lunch, and she said she didn't notice anything off him that day. It was just a normal day. Before leaving the house to make his way back to school, Philip had shouted goodbye to his grandmother. She lived in the house with him. No one saw him leave, but they heard the door close behind him. It was just a short 15-minute walk between Philip's home and his school. Philip was to meet his friend on his way back to school, as they were going to walk back together, as their classes began at 1:45 p.m. However, Philip never made it back to school. Philip Cairns Sr. returned home from work at around 5 p.m. that evening, and he noticed his son was not home. He was happy, as he thought Philip was out with friends socialising, something he wouldn't do often. When Alice Cairns, Philip's mother, arrived home, Philip was not home. The family then called around to Philip's friends' houses to see if he was there, but he wasn't. They then contacted the school and realised Philip never arrived for his afternoon classes. The family then knew something was terribly wrong. This was totally out of character for Philip. So the Cairns family, they contacted the Gardaí to report him missing, and this was just at 7 p.m. The Gardaí didn't arrive to the Cairns house until the next morning, and they assured the family the search will begin immediately, instead of the standard time of 48 hours after a disappearance. However, on that Friday when the search began, there was no sign of Philip. The friend that Philip was to call into on his way back to school, he had gone on a camping trip that weekend, and people thought maybe Philip went with him, but it was confirmed that he did not. Philip was into fishing, and he had been fishing with his dad the previous weekend, and they had planned to go on a trip the present weekend. This had led to theories that he had went fishing on his own. A description of Philip was then released in papers to see if the public could help. He was about 5 foot in height, with dark brown hair, and he was last seen wearing his grey school uniform and carrying a khaki coloured school bag. By the following Tuesday, Gardaí were searching the Rathfarnham area, combing through lanes, parks and fields around Philip's home, while dog units searched 3-mile stretches of local rivers. Volunteers also joined in on the search. This week, Philip and his classmates would have been on midterm from school, so they would have the following week off school. His classmates were called in by the Gardaí to ask them some questions about Philip, as the 6-day search failed this far. The investigation continued for Philip, but at this point, his dad believed Philip may have been abducted somehow, but the Gardaí had no reasons to believe this. On the 30th of October, a checkpoint was mounted in the area, outside of Philip's house and the school that he went to. hoping someone in the area seen something suspicious, or even out of place. But no one had any information leading to any breakthrough for the Cairns family. Between the 29th and 30th of October, the Gardaí had logged 44 different calls that were sightings of the missing boy, which were all over Ireland, each one investigated thoroughly. There were a number of rivers, streams, as well as the Ballyboden Reservoir, and these were also searched. On the evening of the 29th of October at around 8 PM, Philip's school bag, the khaki one he had carried with him to school, it was found by two passing schoolgirls. They noticed the bag and they looked in. This is when they noticed Philip's names on the book. The bag was then sent away to be examined. This lane was searched before in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance, but no evidence was recovered. The Gardaí confirmed the bag was placed there after the original search of the lane. The laneway was called Washington Lane, and it was just 5 minutes from Philip Cairns' house. Laneways like this one are all over South Dublin. They run through the back of the residential houses, and they make for shortcuts for most destinations in the surrounding area, especially for school kids making their way to and from school. However, police noted this lane was not on Philip's route to school and was on the other side of the road, a laneway Philip would not have been willingly walking through. The laneway was sealed off and examined thoroughly, while also door-to-door inquiries were carried out in the housing estate surrounding the lane. The following day, a nearby wooded area was searched. The overgrown spot was located behind a 2-storey house, but there was no evidence found from this. A vigil was held for Philip at the local church, and thousands of people attended. At this vigil, Alice Cairns spoke to the media. She said, and I quote, "Our spirits were high when the Gardaí told us Philip's bag had been found. We thought we would have had him back within a couple of hours, but nothing happened, and Philip never arrived home." End quote. During the investigation, the Gardaí would state they think someone knows what happened to Philip, but are afraid to come out and say it. There were also rumours going around that Philip may have been targeted by school bullies, but Philip's mom said this wouldn't be the case, and that he enjoyed school and he had no issues with bullying. The Gardaí backed this statement, saying they had no evidence linking this at all. There was a reconstruction put in place, and it showed the movements of Philip that day. It was shown on Ireland's most watched news station in the hopes it might lead to something. However, no one came forward with any information or sighting of Philip in the area, which, given the busy time of the day, was baffling for the police. There were no leads or evidence leading the police to find Philip. They turned over every stone, but they couldn't catch a break. While the police continued their investigation, and the Cairns family continued looking for their son, the family began to receive strange phone calls. People breathing heavily down the line, trying to scare them. However, with this came supportive calls, with people reaching out to offer them help. On Tuesday the 18th of November, the Gardaí continued the house-to-house searches going on in the investigation, and they said that the operation was not going to be scaled back for the foreseeable future, as they were hopeful that Philip would be found. Gardaí had followed up saying they were looking for a tall man dressed in black, who was seen around the laneway where the school bag was dropped, and the Gardaí confirmed the only thing missing out of the bag was 2 religious books, and all of his other books were present and accounted for. Philip's picture and description was forwarded onto Interpol, and it was released to 138 countries. But time had passed and no new leads were discovered. Months had passed, and then in the beginning of April 1987, a man was questioned in the case. While questioned, it was confirmed he had no connection to Philip Cairns. But this didn't stop the Sunday World newspaper writing up an article about the man. which in turn led a mob of people to show up outside his apartment in Dublin city centre. After this, a full inquiry to the story posted by Sunday World took place, as the article was considered defamation. As the anniversary of Philip's disappearance approached, Gardaí ramped up the investigation, but the Gardaí would not recover any sufficient evidence which would help the case. And 2 years later, in the summer of 1989, a young Irish boy arrived at a police station in the UK, and he said he was Philip Cairns. Irish detectives then flew over to Scotland to interview the boy, hoping this might be Philip. They had been told the boy had a distinctive mark on his face, which was identical to the one Philip had. But when they arrived to the UK, the Gardaí discovered the boy was a runaway from Ireland, and he looked like Philip. This was devastating news, and it confirmed the Gardaí were at square one again. At the end of November 1989, Gardaí turned to an area that had already been searched, just after Philip's disappearance. The original call in 1986 had resulted in a search of the Stocking Lane area in Rathfarnham. 2 residents had noticed a car pulling up to a dump site at around 2 am, which was on the 5th of November 1986. 2 men had brought a large plastic sack from a car, and then they set it on fire. The residents claimed it had burned for most of the night. After that, the witness called the Gardaí, stating it was a long shot, but it was still worth reporting. When the Gardaí returned to the area 3 years later, the dump itself had been filled in and nothing was found, and the case went cold. In 1995, a man offered a reward of £20,000 for any information leading to Philip Cairns. The man was named as James Connolly. He had won money on the Irish programme winning streak, and he had been interested in the case for a long time and wanted to help the case in any way he could. The Cairns family welcomed the reward. Mr. Connolly's tip line began receiving calls, but unfortunately they never led to any information the Gardaí didn't already have. In April 1999, an eyewitness came forward and he said he seen Philip speaking to a man in a car on the day he disappeared. The witness, a former builder who lived on the Ballyroan Road, and he said he left his house at 12:30 to head to work, but he had to turn around when he realised his car engine was overheating. When he returned home, he saw a boy run toward a car, and it was parked strangely on the corner. The boy fell but quickly got up and made his way to the car, where the witness saw him lean into the car through an open door and then talk to the driver. The man didn't see Philip get in. The witness thought this was unusual and he took down the registration of the car. But before he heard the news of the missing boy, he cleaned out his pockets and had thrown out the piece of paper that had the registration on it. This was by mistake. Gardaí then sent him to a number of hypnotists to try help remember the reg, but that didn't work. His recollection matched closely to another witness who was driving on the road around the same time, and they seen Philip over at a parked car, but the man couldn't remember the registration, and this was just another frustrating tip for the Gardaí. I couldn't see it mentioned anywhere why the man left it so long to report this, but this seems like information you would report straight away, especially after hearing a child went missing in the area. During an interview, Philip's former teacher spoke out. He said Philip would have never got into another vehicle with a stranger, or even approach a strange vehicle, and he was firm in this belief. So what happened to Philip? How does a boy go missing from his suburban area at such a busy time, with no concrete sightings of him? In May 2009, a stretch of wooded area near a golf course in Dublin, just off the M50 motorway, was searched by investigators. There were reports that a section of the golf course collapsed in on itself, the same way a grave would. It was initially reported in 1986, A woman told police she had seen a freshly dug patch of ground at the golf course around the time of Philip's disappearance. This was around 1.5 miles from Philip's home, and the area was searched at the time, but they found no evidence. After receiving this information of the collapsed piece of earth, the Gardaí decided to re-inspect the area, but the Gardaí would never get any breakthrough with it, and it was just another frustrating result. The biggest tip I believe the Gardaí received was from a woman in 2016. She stated she suspected a notorious serial child abuser, Eamon Cook, of Philip's disappearance. Eamon had worked as a radio DJ and he gained a national profile through this. In 2003, he was tried for attempted rape and indecent assault of 4 girls. But the case fell through. It was then in March 2010, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting 2 young girls in his home in the 1970s. Eamon Cook, prior to this, had 8 convictions, including an arson attack on the home of a man that was dating his ex-girlfriend. And in early June 2016, Eamon Cook had died. The witness who brought Eamon Cook's name to the police said, Eamon had brought Philip to his office in Radio Dublin Studios, which he owned. There the man had struck the boy and Philip had fell unconscious. The woman, which was the witness, was a 9-year-old girl at the time, and she fainted. When she woke up, she was in a car. Eamon's ex-wife also told police that when a piece came up about Philip on the TV or radio, Eamon would be very intrigued, and told her he had been out trying to help find Philip. With this, the police ran samples of Eamon's DNA against Philip's bag, but there was no match. Police had managed to interview Eamon just before he passed. He confirmed he knew Philip, and that Philip was in his car, but he would not say if he knew where Philip was, or if he had any part of his disappearance. However, with this, the media and Gardaí had questions. Philip and the 9-year-old girl, who had also been abused at the hands of Eamon, allegedly, how are they not seen in the studios, as this was a busy place? And how did Philip go from Ballyrowan Road to the radio station in Inchicore? These were all unanswered questions. And it was also said Eamon was suffering from Alzheimer's, and he was on death's door when he was interviewed about Philip, so his comments could not be credible. So this brings us to the present day. Philip has still not been found, and Philip's father passed away in 2014 without finding out what happened to his boy. Colaiste Cairns come to terms in the last year or 2 that Philip would not be coming home, and that she just wanted to bury her boy now. The investigation into Philip's disappearance remains open and ongoing, and it is very likely someone out there knows something. My thoughts go out to the Cairns family. Hopefully one day they can bring Philip home and give him a proper burial. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.